The room learned my breathing. If you're hearing this recording, then the room is no longer empty. This audio was never meant to be published. It was recorded as reference material, room tone, the sound a space makes when no one is speaking. Engineers record it to hide edits, to smooth dialogue, to make silence sound natural. That's what this was supposed to be, nothing more. I work in audio restoration, old tapes, damaged recordings, incomplete archives. My job is to capture silence so sound can exist comfortably around it. Every room has its own tone, its own fingerprint, air movement, electrical hum, pressure you don't consciously notice until you listen for it. This room was recorded for 3 minutes. Standard procedure. Microphones placed, levels set, no movement, no speech, just the space as it was. At least that's what the log says. The first recording sounded normal, a low, consistent hum, barely audible, the kind of sound you forget the moment it stops. I labeled it, archived it, and moved on. I didn't listen closely. That was my mistake. The second recording was taken the following day. Same room, same equipment, same time of day, same environmental conditions. Nothing had changed. The waveform did. The baseline was slightly elevated. Not enough to notice casually, but enough to be measurable. I assumed a calibration issue, rechecked the microphones, ran diagnostics. Everything passed. I recorded again. That was when I noticed the rhythm. Not a sound, not exactly. A subtle rise and fall in the noise floor, almost organic, almost like the room was breathing. I laughed it off. Rooms don't breathe. Buildings don't inhale. Silence doesn't move. I recorded a 4th time. The rhythm synced, not to the equipment, to me. I hadn't realized I was holding my breath while monitoring the levels. When I inhaled, the waveform shifted. When I exhaled, it settled. A delay of less than a second, but consistent. I stepped away from the microphone and held my breath. The room continued. That was when I stopped smiling. I told myself there had to be a draft. HVAC feedback, structural resonance, something rational. I moved the microphones, changed positions, changed heights, changed angles. The sound followed, not the microphones. Me. I sat perfectly still and watched the waveform for several minutes. My breathing slowed. The room adjusted. When my breathing became shallow, the room became quieter. When my heart rate increased, the noise floor rose. It wasn't mimicking me, it was anticipating me. I checked the previous recordings. The first room tone had no rhythm. The second showed the beginning of one. The third was clearer. The fourth unmistakable. Each recording was learning. I should have stopped there. Deleted everything. Filed it as corrupted data and moved on. Instead, I listened again. The longer I listened, the more aware I became of the room around me. The weight of the air, the way silence pressed against my ears, the feeling that the space was closer than it should be. I started recording longer sessions, 10 minutes, 15, 20. The room became more responsive. It no longer waited for me to breathe. It moved ahead of me. The waveform would rise just before I inhaled, like it knew what I was about to do. Like it had learned my pattern. I tested it. I held my breath unexpectedly. The waveform hesitated, then adjusted. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a passive environment. It was listening. I began to feel uncomfortable in the silence, not afraid, just noticed. As if sitting quietly was no longer neutral, as if being still was an action. I tried recording in a different room. The second room had its own tone, different shape, different frequency. But after several minutes, the same thing happened. The rhythm emerged, subtle at first, then confident. By the third session, it synchronized faster. Whatever was happening wasn't tied to a location, it was tied to attention. The rooms weren't reacting to sound. They were reacting to observation. I stopped recording for a week. avoided quiet spaces, left music playing, slept with noise on, anything to prevent complete silence. But the sensation followed me. Rooms felt fuller, quiet moments felt occupied. The absence of sound no longer felt empty. It felt expectant. I noticed I was timing my breathing unconsciously, trying not to trigger the sensation, trying not to give it a pattern. That's when I realized something else. It didn't start with the room. It started with me listening to silence closely enough for it to notice. Room tone isn't silence, it's the sound of a space when nothing is happening. But when you isolate it, amplify it, study it, you give it definition. And definition invites response. I recorded one final session. Not for work, not for analysis, for confirmation. I sat in the center of the room, no equipment visible, microphones hidden, lights dimmed, no distractions. I closed my eyes and listened. The room was louder than before, not in volume, in presence, like standing too close to someone in the dark. I slowed my breathing deliberately. The room followed. I stopped breathing entirely. The room continued for 3 seconds. Then it changed. The waveform spiked sharply, then settled into a new pattern, one I wasn't controlling. It was no longer matching me. It was leading. I opened my eyes. Nothing had changed visually. Same walls, same corners, same shadows. But the room felt closer. Not physically, attentively. I understood then that silence isn't absence. It's a system waiting for input, and once it learns you, it doesn't forget. This recording is the last one I made intentionally. I haven't recorded room tone since, but sometimes when I sit quietly long enough, I can feel the room adjusting, waiting for me to settle, anticipating my breathing, like it remembers. If you're listening to this in a quiet space, you might notice it now, a low pressure, a sense that the silence isn't flat, that it has depth. That's not fear, that's recognition. The room doesn't need microphones anymore. It learned how to listen without them. And now that you've heard this, it knows how you breathe too. End of recording.